Yes.
Hey there, this is Susan Collins, and I'm here with my colleague Graham Gardner and a wonderful group of international dowsers. And we are excited to be presenting International Dowsing Day. So, Graham, can you please begin our process?
Hey everybody, welcome to International Dowsing Day 2026. We have another good lineup of speakers for you this time, and I'll just introduce them to you. So from England, we have the lovely Maria Wheatley. Hi, Maria. And from America, we have Joey Korn. Hi, Joey. And then we have, I'm the next speaker, so hi me. Then we have, out from Scotland, we have me. From England again, Alex Russell-Stoneham. Hi, Alex. And then from Canada, my sister Susan Collins. And finally from Japan, we have Mr. Nobuo Kato, assisted by his translator, Masako Watanabe. Welcome to you both. So without further ado, let's kick off with our first speaker. So over to you, Maria.
Hi, it's great to be here, guys, and thank you for having me. Well, my talk is going to be about sound frequencies that are found at stone circles that are dowsable and can heal us and change our consciousness. So a few years ago now, I was with a retired engineer and I wanted to find out, is there more to earth energies than just electromagnetic energies? And that was my first opening question, and it led to a field of discovery. So imagine now that you're at Stonehenge or you're at Avebury and there's standing stones, and especially in Scotland, Graham, you're spoiled for choice. Come on. So you're at an ancient site, you're at a standing stone, and we know as dowsers that that standing stone is rooted often into earth energy. And when it's rooted into earth energy, it emits patterns. And one of those patterns that are dowsable are concentric circles. So imagine you've got a standing stone and concentric circles around it. I knew this was dowsable. I've doused it ever since I was 30, going back many, many decades now. So we decided to put copper probes in the ground on the exact dowsable point. And what would that frequency be of the first concentric circle? And I knew it was going to be quite astounding. And we got in the ground. So this isn't audible. It isn't above ground. It's the earth energy in the ground being absorbed by the megalith and then being transmitted in concentric circles. And what we got was 133 hertz. And that entrains your brain. And when it's entraining your brain, it means it's encouraging your brain to go to that frequency. And that particular frequency is very meditative. So I think the priesthood of Stonehenge and Avebury weren't necessarily always stood by the standing stones. They were a little bit of distance away on that dowsable frequency pattern. And we can easily douse these at stone circles. In fact, in my own garden, because let's face it, not everybody is like me living next door to Avebury and Stonehenge. And people say to me, Maria, how can I do this in my back garden? Well, you can get a stone and root it into the nearest type of earth energy pattern that's really easy to find. Then the stone starts to emit these frequencies. So we can do this with our own gardens, for example, by just putting a standing stone in place. It doesn't necessarily work with timber, but it certainly works with stone. That's the first dowsable concentric circle. So what's the next one that ripples out? Again, we put copper probes into the ground quite some distance. And in fact, today, for everybody listening, English Heritage and the National Trust have banned all experiments. English Heritage have banned me from doing filming at Stonehenge if I bring dowsing rods. That's the situation that we're in. But we can go to these places and still have a go at getting these frequencies. So the next frequency that I got was around 195 hertz. That entrains you into your throat chakra. So I envision that going back millennia ago at Avebury, you would be on that particular concentric circle and it would open up your throat chakra for you to speak your rituals or your ceremonies at places like Avebury, Stonehenge. I went to Karnak in Egypt, for example, and found similar things. And I've been to many other countries besides. So I know that these frequencies are in the ground. The other thing that I discovered about 2 to 3 years ago now is quite fascinating when it comes to ancient sites and dowsing and sound frequencies. Pythagoras, who needs no introduction, and Kepler both said they discovered the music of the spheres. Now imagine the solar system. It has concentric circles rippling out from, say, Jupiter to Saturn to Mercury, all of those orbits creating concentric circle patterns. I was working with a mathematician at the time, the late Richard Cardrew, and we looked at places like Woodhenge and Stonehenge, and I was dowsing these earth energy patterns. And I said to him in an intuitive moment, and come on, people, we all have these intuitive moments. We are guided by spirit. We are guided by the spirit of place, by the ancestors. And so I said, we've got all of these earth energy patterns rippling out across the landscape. And could it in some way repeat what Pythagoras found in the heavens? And we realized at that moment in time, the earth energy patterns first discovered by Guy Underwood, the surveys given to my late father, they never interpreted it this way. It took a woman's intuition and a woman's power. Not that I'm a feminist, guys, but it took that. And then I realized the two matched. The earth energy patterns ripple out musical harmonics and ratios. So, for example, when you're at the center of Stonehenge and you are above the altar stone, or you're at Avebury by the obelisk stone, they're the center stones settings at that particular stone circle. They radiate out musical harmonics called the perfect fourth and the perfect fifth. And in music, this means harmony. So when we look at earth energies, we don't necessarily these days think of them as just being electromagnetic. They are Hertzian frequencies, and they are also musical harmonics. Okay, I'm at Stonehenge now, and I'm stood by that famous lintel. I see it on a background of one of the speakers here, and I'm stood by that lintel stone circle just before the blue stones. That distance between the two relates to an earth energy that gives off the major third in music. Gothic cathedrals, Christians, sing in the major third because it changes your consciousness to an emotional high, getting higher to the frequencies of singing to be closer to God. So these earth energies emit these patterns. We just can't hear them. They're not audible. They're in the ground. They're mathematical, musical harmonics. And when I realized what I had discovered within the ground, within these earth energy patterns, I then got people to come in and what do you experience? And started to really test out that theory. Was it working with people? And that seems to be the case. So certain ancient sites, certain earth energies release certain musical harmonics. And that's what Kepler and Pythagoras discovered in the heavens above, that they called the music of the spheres. I then decided to get an expert neuroscientist to test out my brain patterns. What was happening to my brain when I was in these dowsable musical harmonic areas, be that the concentric circles, be that the musical harmonics of earth energy patterns. And this is what happened. I was rigged up. I had all of the tried to rig up and put under my hairspray. So they had to put all of these points in my hair, and then I had to enter the area, douse it first. What was it doing to my brain? Patterns and brainwaves. Instantaneously, it set my brain into delta. Now, delta should only be when you're in very, very deep sleep. Yet here I was, rigged up, dowsing and talking. So these energy patterns can instantly change our brain waves. This was analyzed by the Monroe Institute in the USA. So I know that when I take people to ancient sites, be that at Avebury or worldwide, and you put someone in a particular megalithic power radiating concentric circles or particular earth energy patterns that relate to musical harmonics, you're instantly changing your consciousness. That's why I personally think that ancient sites are healing centers. And even if we look at ancient manuscripts going back to the 12th century, written by Geoffrey of Monmouth, he wrote about Stonehenge. No stone at Stonehenge doth not have healing power. And he's the guy, basically, that introduced us to Merlin and King Arthur in that particular manuscript. So what I'm saying about Stonehenge, these earth energy patterns are not just electromagnetic. They are releasing particular frequencies that encourage our brain to enter a particular consciousness. And some of that can be healing. In fact, we have probably all heard 30 years or so ago now of Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, who doused the Mary, and Michael Currents. Well, I decided to, what are they? I don't believe, like I said, they're just electromagnetic. What frequency would they emit at particular ancient sites? So we went to one, put in the probe, set up the console. I would douse it. I would go on the central band of the Mary current, and we got 323 hertz. That's a really frequency that heals thyroid problems. And that's what many, many sound frequency experts say. So we can say at certain points, even on Earth current, well documented, and Hamish Miller forwarded my first book about 25 years ago now, that these entrain the brain to suddenly allow that healing frequency. Then I went to another type of earth energy pattern that standing stones emit that has long been documented by the dowsing community. And I decided, let's investigate that. So if you imagine now, I've talked about concentric circles rippling out from megalithic energy. When you put that standing stone into earth energy, it draws up the energy and pushes it out. There's another type of energy pattern that's a bit like a cross. To simplify it, it's like a kind of cardinal cross. And when we put the frequency testers into that, it came out astonishingly so at 285 hertz, which is the frequency of even healing damaged DNA, your DNA. So what I think is the ancients knew this, and I discovered through dowsing 10 years ago that the people that built ancient sites in this land were not like you and I. They did not look like you and I. They had elongated skulls. I went to Cambridge University to photograph them to prove to the world that this ancient civilization had these elongated skulls. And when I read the reports by anthropologists about these skulls, they said their ears were placed further back. So they weren't in the position that you and I are familiar with seeing. So I suggest that these elongated skulled people could hear these earth frequencies. And I think that's where the mythos of the Fae came from. There are fairy folk out there, but the mythos in this land with the Tuatha De Danann from ancient Ireland are saying that they remember is in the collective consciousness, these elongated skulls. So through Dowsing, I introduced to the world that there's these there are rather this long lost civilization that got written out of history. And I photograph now numerous elongated skulls. They are the people, the ancient Britons, that built these sites. We are experiencing these ancient sites through our culture rather than the culture that built them. So I see kind of all of these sound frequencies, the experience being heard by the ancient people, and possibly that could link into things like song lines and other ways of experiencing these sites. But what I do know is that the skull that I first discovered through dowsing in the largest long barrow in Northwest Europe linked me to a lost civilization. And beautifully so, that first skull I discovered was that of a woman. And she kind of reached out to me across time and guided me to all of these different dowsable energies, as if she was saying to me personally, this is how we experienced these ancient sites. This is how we discovered the land, the musical harmonics, the concentric circles that the standing stones emit. And now we are the custodians of these ancient sites, and we're experiencing them in our ways, but we need to remember the ancient ancestors that constructed the sites that we've inherited.
Wow. Thanks so much, Maria. That's some fantastic research you've been doing there. Where can people find out more about this? Is it on your website?
Absolutely. I've got numerous articles on the Avebury, that's Avebury, the Avebury Experience.co.uk, and my teaching platform for dowsing, ancestral sites, and many other things is esotericcollege.com.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to move from England across the other side of the pond to the wonderful Mr. Joey Korn, who needs no introduction. Joey, over to you.
Well, thank you, Graham, and thanks to both you and Susan for putting this together again and for inviting me to be a part of it. I love sharing my work with other dowsers and non-dowsers alike. I have been dowsing now. I learned to dowse 40 years ago. And once I learned, I was hooked. I was a passionate dowser from that point on. I had wanted to learn to dowse since I was a child, and it just took me that long to run into somebody that would help me to do that, learn that. And I became, I like to say, a dowsing fool. And then 10 years later, I made my first. I didn't expect it. I made my first discovery in dowsing of what I call the bed pattern around beds, which I've figured out over time was the human energy pattern imprinted around the beds. And everybody, wherever we lie down on a physical structure raised off the floor, we leave an imprint of our energy pattern. And I had already been before that, though. I had already been to one dowsing conference in '94 in Vermont, and I was blown away. I had no idea I'd be teaching just 2 years later, but I was blown away by all the things dowsing. Well, I was opened up that you can do with dowsing. And so then I learned what I was especially drawn to, especially after that first conference, was earth energies and clearing energy problems, especially earth energies that dowsers call geopathic stress, causing geopathic stress zones. And I learned all the different ways in the next couple of years people use that I was taught to block, divert, or neutralize these energies in the earth related to underground water, Hartman and Curry grid lines, noxious rays. And I tried them all, and they all seemed to work, at least for a while. And but then I thought, they're all so different, these different rituals and techniques. And I thought, well, if they're all so different, um, so, if they're all so different, um, it must not be the ritual or the technique, it must be intent. So I thought, if it's intent, I should be able to do it with a blessing. And why block, divert, or neutralize these energies if we can just call on them in a blessing to be changed to be beneficial? And that's what I did. And that's what I brought to the Dowsing world when I started teaching in 96. So that first discovery I made, like I said, was what put me on the path of teaching. Now, today, many years later, is still central to my work, the human energy pattern. And I want to say, and I've been now dowsing since 97. I've been teaching dowsing and offering space clearing services early on, mostly on site as I traveled. And then as I traveled less and less, I got more and more into remote space dowsing and space clearing and personal energy clearing. And I was still caught up, even though I did all my dowsing in those space clearing in those first few years, first 7 to 10 years, by blessing all the energy of the home or the office, whatever, and people, whatever I happen to be involved with. I still, I still separated the earth energies, thinking they were causing problems, from the human related energies. And then in 2007, I had three clients kept calling me back. And it seemed to be in the same couple of weeks. And they kept calling me back. And they were all having paranormal activity in their homes. And all of them were saying the same thing. Everything was much better after our session, after you blessed all the energies, but it all came back. The paranormal stuff came back. And I checked again, and sure enough, all the energy grids in the home were detrimental. I'm going to show you an image of it soon. I hope I have time. And and so I tried it again. Well, next day it was still back out again. So uh, so I realized I must be missing something. And I changed. And by the way, the way I do remote work is I'll do all my energy work with blessing. I only use dowsing. I only use L rods to find energies. And for the most part, I knew at the time what energies I was looking for, but I knew I had to be missing something. So rather than look for the energies that I was typically looking for, like in underground stream, energy fields, Hartman and Curry grid lines, noxious rays, I set my intent on show me what is causing the energy problems in the people's lives and my clients' lives while I was in this session, with my clients' lives and in the energies of their home. And my rods just started guiding me. And that means walk that way. And they ultimately guided me to a place where I got a reaction just inside the bathroom of our hall bathroom. And it wasn't a horizontal line like all the other ones that I've been used to finding, or most of the other ones. It was a vertical column about a foot or a third of a meter in diameter that ran from floor to ceiling. And it was detrimental. And I thought, this must be, if they're all these clients are having paranormal activity, and everybody doesn't. I'd say about 30 to 40% of my clients through the years have some kind of paranormal activity. I said, they're all seeing spirits, I thought. And then I thought, this could be a doorway or a portal to the astral planes that allow access to what in those days I called entities. And I don't like that term. Um, and so it didn't take me many times to try, but I came up with, but I finally figured it out. I got a dowsing reaction to that vertical column. And I changed the blessing that I would normally use rather than just make things beneficial. I said, ask the divine to do whatever is appropriate with this energy that my hands and rods are in, this vertical column, to bring healing and balance to the complete beings of all who are affected by the energy. Immediately, it disappeared. And and then I checked all the energies of the home, and the Hartman grids were beneficial. The what some would call um, noxious rays were beneficial. The Curry grids were beneficial. I knew I had found something. I realized the earth energies are not separate and distinct from us. They're here to support us. They're in all of our homes. We want them to be clear, balanced, and beneficial, not causing problems for us. And I realized geopathic stress. Many dowsers have agreed with me through the years, especially professional dowsers. Geopathic stress is an illusion. Yes, the energies can weaken us. These earth energies can weaken us when they're in our homes, but if we're but they but they're not the cause. They are symptoms like our weakening when we're in them. And the cause is almost always interference energy, what I call interference energy. And rather than call them, and what this does, this allows access to what I call negative beings. And these beings are all have to do with us. So, they originally brought in by intense negativity. I think we actually create beings, these negative beings with thought through the eons, they're created by the negativity of mankind. And I think they've grown slowly through the years to be more and more common, but very slowly through the eons. I think they've been around for as long as mankind has had the free will to be negative, especially intensely negative. And these negative thought forms take on their own existence. Since they're created seemingly separate existences, since they're created by negativity, they feed on negativity. So for the most part, they do not have access to the energies of our home or our energies. And they don't always, as I said earlier, cause paranormal activity. But the um, the one for the most part, they cannot access our home or our energy, the energies of our home. But once somebody has attracted interference energy through in the early days, through intense negativity, fear, anger, jealousy, rage, being intensely ill, mental and emotional problems, um, then um, then they have access to a home because we attract this interference energy that connects to us, and then it spreads out into the home. What I'd like to show you is a few slides on how that happens. Then I'd like to take a couple of minutes to help you understand why it's so prevalent now. And you can learn much more in my website at dowsers.com. So share screen. Where did it go? I had it set up and I don't see it now. Darn it. Well, we'll try one more time.
Joe, perhaps you could send the slides and we can put them on Facebook as part of the presentation later.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah,
Um,
we can edit them in
okay,
later.
but let me just say, go back. I couldn't. Okay, I couldn't find it. Thank you. Yes, our homes are full of energy grids, and this will clear almost all of it. Now, once somebody attracts interference energy, it not only affects all the energies of their home and anywhere they're imprinted, but it affects everybody else in the home. So then they're affected by interference energy, but they haven't attracted it or caught it yet. But it's contagious. So when several people in a home when one person has interference energy, it causes all the energies of problems in the home and the other people's energy patterns. That person, then another person can pick it up, and it's twice as intense and easier to pick up. And then another one can pick it up, and the same thing, and it just gets more and more intense. Now, from 2007, when I discovered interference energy as the cause of almost all energy problems in homes, um, and to 2020, for 14 years actually, I cleared that way. The problem was I couldn't figure out a way to teach it, even after holding over 45 days night retreats in our home. I didn't know of anybody who they learned all about the grids and they learned how to find these grids in homes. And we did remote sessions. They all learned how to clear interference energy in my home. But you had to find that elusive vertical column that sets up in one of three different places in two different bathrooms as a general rule, so they weren't getting that part of it. So I got really discouraged because I saw things changing in 2020. Once I discovered interference energy as a cause of all these energy problems in people's homes, and I started clearing that way from the interference energy itself, then it really helped my work grow to the point that within a few years, that was all I did remote. I don't travel to teach anymore hardly at all, and that's been since 2015. And and then but now, once I discovered interference energy, every single client that called on me, I found it in their home. But it usually wasn't connected to my client or their family members. It was usually connected to somebody else from outside the home. That I have a way to determine that with my client's working with my client, that it spent at least a day or a night with them, at least a night with them, where they laid down and left an imprint. And then I would ask them what's going on with that person, and would be in a divorce or a financial distress or real major health problem or loss of the loved one. That's how I learned the things that you can attract it directly. But then in 2020, shortly before, after COVID was getting going strong, I realized every single client started the client themselves had interference energy, and some or all of their family members had interference energy. And I could see interference energy exploding, like spreading like wildfire in the population, because it was spreading like wildfire in my home. And I mean in my clients' homes. And so I realized that all the fear that was put us into our lives worldwide because of this COVID, and then the hate and negativity of political dichotomies and then we're stuck at home. We're wondering, and am I going to lose my job and lose my business, my home, my car, my family members, my own life? Somebody attracts the interference energy. Then it spreads to another one, makes it more intense. Then it spreads to another one. Everybody's locked in the homes. So then when we were finally allowed to go out and travel and see others and have others come see us and to see the world again, everywhere we go, people were leaving their imprints and leaving interference energy, to the point now that I would say well over half the population of the planet, including probably at least half of you, are either negatively or affected by it or have actually caught it. And you cannot hardly go to a hotel room or any place where people rent to stay, where it's not loaded with people with imprints of people with interference energy. Finally, what I said, after 14 years, and I'm going to wind this up, after 14 years of trying to teach my students how to do this, and when I realized in 2021 that how it was spreading through the world, I just knew if I wanted to come up I had to come up with a way. If I want to help help the planet, help the people, more and more people in the population of the planet, I need to come up with a way that anybody can do this. And anybody can clear this energy without any dowsing experience or any kind of energy work, with a simple blessing that I call the miracle blessing process. And what I want to wrap up what I'm saying at this point is dowsing is more than a way to find lost objects, find a place to drill a well, bury treasure, asking yes no questions or other informational charts and stuff. Dowsing is way more than that. These are sacred tools. Sacred tools. and that we use in a sacred process to explore the energies of life itself. And all the energies of life itself, of creation, are in repeating geometric patterns. So to give you a hint, in your dowsing, and this took me decades of years, and I know all of you know the feeling to really understand it more and more. But the key is to look for repeating patterns in these energies. And that's one of the things I wanted to show you. And maybe while somebody else is, after everybody speaks, maybe I can figure out how to bring that thing up, or either we'll send it to you, like I said, like you mentioned, Susan. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks, Joey. Great to have you. It's good to see you again. I think it was an Earth Energies group and the BSD that I first met you like many years
Yeah.
ago. Yeah, it's been a long
Oh,
time.
by the way, the BSC, I'm about to run out of my book because I lost 500 of them to a flood in Florida a couple of years ago. But the BSD is printing copies there, and it'll be a lot easier for people in the whole UK to get my book now, and I appreciate that they're doing that.
Great. Yeah.
They
Good.
hope
All
to
right.
have it hope to have it soon by the Mason Symposium. So in the next couple of weeks, they ought to have it.
Oh, yeah, you're speaking of that as well. Yeah.
I might also have still some of my rods left
Yeah.
for sale.
Great. Okay, thanks, Joey. We're going to move now to me in Scotland, but I'm not going to be talking about Scotland. I'm going to take you somewhere much further away. Let me just share screen here. There we go. Hopefully that's working. Yeah, so last year I was in Antarctica on an expedition cruise. Now the cruise was to visit South Georgia and Antarctica, and naturally I thought, well, I'll have to do some dowsing there, but what can we do? The cruise have very strict restrictions on where you can go and how long you can spend on land. You're only allowed 100 people maximum at any one time. So usually there was much less than that. We were groups of like 30 or something. But you had to walk in very strict regimented areas marked out by flags. You can't approach the animals. You can't kneel down. You just have to, keep your boots on the ground. And all your clothing has to be inspected and cleaned. Your boots have to be disinfected and scrubbed before and after. So they're quite strict on what you can do. So it was clear I wasn't going to be able to have any extensive dowsing, like following a line somewhere. So I gave it some thought, and then I thought the easiest thing I could douse would be the earth grids, the Hartmann and Currie grids that Joey's just mentioned, as they could be found anywhere, and I wouldn't have to spend a great deal of time trying to find and track other lines. So here's a quick overview of the cruise outline. We started off from Puerto Williams here, right at the bottom end of Chile, over to South Georgia, which took us just about 3 days. We tootled up and down there for a couple of days, and then we sailed down to Elephant Island, the South Shetland Islands, and finally onto the Antarctic Peninsula. So here's our first landfall in Grytviken. I just let you know, like to see some penguins here. Don't worry, there's plenty more to come. Grytviken is a former whaling station, and it's now home of the South Georgia Heritage Trust. So there's a museum, a lovely little Norwegian chapel, and they have a shop where I was astonished to find that one of the 2 ladies serving was actually from Glasgow, my hometown. Plus, of course, on Grytviken is the grave of Sir Ernest Shackleton. This is where he ended up being buried. And I've been a complete Shackleton nerd for a few years now. And even on the ship, they were calling me the Shackleton guy. So here's his grave, and we toasted him with, I had fine Shackleton whiskey in my hip flask. So a quick overview of the grids, if you're not familiar. Here's the 2 Hartmann grids and the Currie grid, and a latitude of 54 degrees north, which is the latitude of sort of center of UK. This is kind of the spacings that you expect to find. And the first chance I had to have a look at them was in St Andrews Bay in South Georgia, which is again 54 degrees and a little bit south. St Andrews Bay holds the world's largest king penguin colony. So I was able to douse both the grids there quite easily, but as you see, the latitude is pretty much equivalent to the UK. So both the grids were pretty much as expected. Here are some penguins for you. King penguins, it's the world's largest colony. Now they're all molting, so they can't go into the sea for a couple of weeks until their feathers have grown in. but they're finding it very hot. It was 10 degrees Celsius here. So they're standing in the water to try and keep their feet warm. We move on, and after 3 days sailing, we got to Elephant Island, where they had a nice sandy beach where I could mark out the grids in the sand. I've overlaid the grids in white here so you can see what's going on. Now we're at latitude 61 degrees south here, so a little bit further south. And here I did notice there's a definite reduction in size. Not huge, but definitely getting smaller. The next step was in the South Shetland Islands at Yankee Harbour, another degree south, 62 degrees south here. It was really cold that day, as you can see, and the ground was just too rocky and too hard to accurately map things. I was kind of measuring things with my boots, which turned out to be exactly 30 centimeters in length, so I could calculate distances afterwards. And here both grids definitely seemed a bit smaller. Here's a short video of me dowsing, but very difficult to not get distracted by other people when you're doing this. Many of them found it quite interesting what I was doing. Even the crew were quite interested in what was going on. Just using my camera and odometer here. And here's our route from Elephant Island down through the South Shetland Islands. It's these guys here. And next stop was Yankee Harbour, Half Moon Island down to Mickelson Harbour in Trinity Island. And here I managed to do a bit of dowsing, but I kept getting interrupted by curious onlookers, and the crowd was kind of hard to describe any lines. So although I did observe a slight reduction in size, you can see we're down at 63 degrees south here. So I quickly had to abandon the attempt and didn't have a chance to record anything there. So we continued on from Mickelson. We had a couple of other stops on the way here, all the way down to Neko Harbour. And this is actually on Antarctica itself, on the Antarctic Peninsula. So, and here I found a nice area where I could describe the grid lines using my walking pole, watched over by this rookery of Gen 2 penguins. This wasn't the furthest south we got to, but it was the most southerly landfall, and it's the only landing on Antarctica itself. So here's me trying to dowse and mark out the lines with my walking pole at the same time. And again, I'm trying just to measure the distance using baby steps in my boots. And I just made a note like, 3 boot lengths or 2 boot lengths or whatever. So again, here are the 2 grids. I've marked them in white so you can see what's going on. So the Hartman grid was 0.8 by 0.84, which is much narrower than it had been. And the current grid, about 0.6 by 0.6. So the theory that you read in the books does seem to hold out, that the grids do get tighter as your latitude north or south does increase and you get closer to the poles. So that was it, really. There's a nice shot of us standing on the Antarctic Peninsula with the ship in the background. And we actually made that on the cover of Dowsing Today recently. So hope you enjoyed that little slideshow, and thanks for watching. So our next speaker, moving back to England, is lovely Alex Russell-Stoneham, who is going to be talking about hidden labyrinths. Alex and I do share a common love of labyrinths, so I love what she talks about them. So over to you, Alex.
Thank you so much, Graham. And I've loved hearing everyone else's journeys and talks. And thank you for having me. It's lovely to be part of this merry band of people passionate about dowsing and spreading the word about that. Yes, so like Graham, with a fascination about labyrinths, this started, and I'm going to share some slides. Here we go. Hopefully you can see. I'm really passionate about discovering labyrinths, understanding how they make you feel, what shifts are possible, how to facilitate people, how they walk the labyrinth, the intentions set. I've been lucky enough to participate in Graham's labyrinth walking dance in one of the British Society of Dowsing's events at a symposium. And it's a lovely way to enjoy a labyrinth. And also as a dowser, like Joey, I've been dowsing for 40 years, and I just love feeling the energies as you go through the labyrinth, the different patterns that evolve and the things you discover. So I'm going to share with you just one of my favorite things to tune into when we're doing the work, the inner work. And when we see the patterns, like, Jerry, you were saying about these patterns that you can see, and with your miracle blessing process, and how you see these things reoccurring. And I keep seeing, you know, like Maria was saying about the music of the spheres and the planets and the movements, as above, so below, as within, so without, as the universe, so the soul. And for me, a labyrinth is the most beautiful way of expressing that. Very profound mystical saying. And you can see here a flower of life, because this was the first clue I got many, many moons ago. It became something in my awareness, that quiet little nudge you get. And I noticed the flower of life for the first time a fair few years ago. And I thought, oh, I better take note of that. It's coming into my awareness. Let me start playing with that. And I made crystal grids with the flower of life and artwork. And it was a really lovely sort of introduction towards labyrinths. I studied sacred geometry in terms of how to design and build artwork of labyrinths, how the divine proportions and working with, as well as the flower of life and the golden ratio. And every labyrinth starts with a circle, and then it goes into a Vesica Piscis when you are drawing them. And it might be different when you're building them in the land, but this is how I was taught by a mathematical artist how to draw labyrinths. And you can see the four-petal flower here, and it's really beautiful. When you walk in a labyrinth, you you go towards what looks like the center, and it actually is a bit beguiling, because you end up further out than you think you're going to be when you walk in. And it's a bit like the alchemical journey, the alchemy to who we really are. You think you're on a particular trajectory, but actually life comes along and you go off left or right. And each turn can be a different experience, a different challenge, perhaps, and you can feel different things. And this is my diagram of how it feels to be in the center of a labyrinth. So you have a horizontal line here representing a, a, a sort of, what's the word? When you cut through things, a cross section, that's it. When you're looking at a cross section of the earth, this line across here is like the grass on the ground. And this little pink dot here is the labyrinth goal at the very center of a labyrinth. And this pink line here is going off into the distance. That's an energy line. When we build a labyrinth, what happens is within 1 to 2 days, another line is drawn towards it. So the water lines underneath cross. And then you start to see the spiral vortex of the energy. Some people call it a water dome, some people call it a blind spring. This is so beautifully dowsable, and some people refer to it as heaven on earth. So imagine when you've done your path into the labyrinth, you're right at this center. It's everything and it's nothing. You're in the 0 point field, like the vortex of your own heart space, and you can have the transformation of subtle yet powerful proportions. And after the flower of life, I was guided to build a labyrinth. I had that little voice. When you have a quiet moment of contemplation, you hear a voice from your higher self that may suggest something for your highest path. I was guided to build a labyrinth, and this is the winter labyrinth. I raked in the leaves and I put where the labyrinth goal was. It's a very simple 3-circuit labyrinth, and I put an amethyst geode right in the center. It felt like the right thing to do. When I walked this labyrinth, there were so many messages I got, and so many mystical experiences, visions. You can sort of have wonderful experiences from such a simple journey to the heart of who we are. And when I got this little download one day, I was told that labyrinths are how dragons lie. And it was a really powerful moment, and it got me thinking on a completely different level about labyrinths. While I was working with this labyrinth, I found the pattern of a five-pointed star, and at each point I could then connect with a spiral energy at each point, which seemed to me to represent the five element theory. And I mapped these out and would walk the labyrinth, and I would notice, okay, is this meridian or this element in balance? Do I feel sluggish walking through? And I noticed these changed with the moon cycles as well. So this is part of, what I'm learning, what I'm developing. And then after realizing about this multi-layered infinite exploration of what you can discover while walking or building or developing, playing with labyrinths, I found in the sanctuary in Avebury a hidden labyrinth. I asked my dowsing rods to show me the way to walk into the labyrinth, not into the labyrinth. I didn't know there was a labyrinth there because it's not in plain sight. You can't see it. The sanctuary is a really quiet space, and it's a really beautiful space. It's one of my favorite areas, and you can see here an overhead shot of the sanctuary, and my dowsing rods guided me to walk in, and I did a little set of circuits here just following my dowsing rods. And then at the center here, what was really beautiful is I was looking towards the sun, which was about to set over in this direction. I'm looking towards the west from here. And I got a song downloaded, which was Lucy in the Sky of Diamonds by the Beatles. And I could sense there was a white air dragon, elemental dragon on the sunset sort of, horizon coming towards me. And being in the center of this labyrinth, which I didn't realize was even there, to be introduced to a dragon energy for the first time was the most profound and joyful mystical experience. When walking out again, following these paths, it ended up being like a double labyrinth because I could see here, walking around, it was like one set of circuits in and then double that on the way out. And it was so empowering. The energy, when you're going into a labyrinth, it's almost like an in-breath. It's like, it's harder to breathe in than it is to exhale. And so when you're exhaling, it's kind of galvanizing. When you're going out of the labyrinth, you feel emboldened, you feel like you've done the work going in, let go, shed stuff. And this dragon message was just really magical. And the very next day, I was given a book to read by a dowsing friend, David, and it's the Dragons book by Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst. And this picture was on the back. And I couldn't believe my eyes. Here's a dragon lying in the shape of a labyrinth. Part of the clues I've been getting reiterated. And after being in the sanctuary, I remembered in Hamish Miller's and Paul Broadhurst's book, The Sun and the Serpent, you can see the labyrinthine nature of the Glastonbury tour. And I was dowsing with Tamar Dowsers and the lovely Nigel Twin, and he's been to Murray Vale so many times, and he was showing us the earth energies there. And within the stone circle in Merivale, he knew of my passion for labyrinths, and he said, Alex, why don't you go and have a little douse in there? And lo and behold, there was a labyrinth in the stone circle here. And a little bit later on, I went for the very first time to the most epic piece of land I can can ever say I've experienced, and I've experienced some wonderful places to go. I felt drawn to go to Dragon Hill in Uffington, and I had no idea what an amazing site this was until going there. And right at the top of the hill, as legend or folklore has it, St. George smote the dragon. Dragon's blood was spilled right here on the top of the hill, and no grass will grow because dragon's blood was apparently spilt there. And as you can imagine, this is sort of so metaphorical, archetypal. And walking here, I was talking with Maeve Calvert, the Sherwood Dowser, who's a lovely person. And she was saying this is a bit like the eye or the head or the brain of the dragon. And the white horse of Uffington, you can see here, is like the heart chakra of the dragon. You can see the folds of landscape, and just being there in person is the most amazing experience. And this is my little sketch of the invisible hidden labyrinth that I found, where that white exposed chalk is on top of the head or the eye of the dragon. The Hurlers in Cornwall has 3 stone circles. It's on Bodmin Moor, and it's a beautiful place where the Michael and Mary energy currents meet. And I found in the 3rd circle a labyrinth that was hidden in plain sight. Dulo Stone Circle, the nearest one to where I live in Cornwall, it's a very small but a very powerful and gentle white quartz stone circle. And inside there was another hidden labyrinth. Going to King Arthur's Hall on Bodmin Moor, this beautiful, amazing place to go. And I really recommend Stuart Dow's talk on King Arthur's Hall if you're interested to find out more. Again, inside this special place, there was a hidden labyrinth. So here's where I've got to so far, but I want to explore some more. And I would love to hear from anyone who's found labyrinths inside sacred sites or just in plain sight where we don't know they're there. I feel called to explore Castlerigg in Cumbria. Not been there yet, but I'm interested. This looks very dragony, the background here of the landscape, and so I'm also drawn to look at St Michael's Mount in Cornwall. And very soon I'm going to Brittany, so I definitely want to find out if there's a labyrinth on the land here. What about Skellig Michael off the coast of Ireland? Lou Island, also known as St George Island. Oh, there's a dragon connection. So dragons and labyrinths in these sacred sites seem to keep coming up in my conscious awareness. Last year I was very drawn to go to Bardsey Island off the northwest coast of Wales, land of 20,000 saints, I believe, a very much a Merlin connection there as well. And all of North Wales looks like dragons in the land as well. What about Newgrange in Ireland? I wonder if there's a hidden labyrinth there. I'm getting a few clues from some of the carvings in the stone. So where else? So please get in touch if you found any. And my final message is, what you seek, you will find. So thank you very much.
Lovely, Alex. Thank you so much for that. You need to come up to Scotland. We have lots of stuff up here.
Thank you, Graham. Definitely. I love Scotland. Thank you.
Okay, we're taking you back across the Atlantic now to the lovely Susan Collins, my sister colleague at International Dowsers based in Canada. Susan, take it away.
Thank you. I have a slideshow. Hopefully it works. We rehearse and then one never knows, right? Now, can you see that?
No.
No, I forgot to share my screen, I think. Let me
We can fix it in the edit.
You can fix it in the edit. Thank you. Let me hit escape and let me go into more, share screen.
There we
Try
go.
this one. Now I have to find my slideshow from the beginning. Already. No, that's not the beginning. So I would like to talk about dosing your microbiome. I'm all about the health of everything. So I came in clairsentient, so I could always feel things around me, which were very frightening to me. I had a big corporate career, but then in 1982, when I was 29, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and was basically crippled. My hands didn't work for the next 23 years. I had all the big drugs and all the rest of that. In 1999, I found dowsing. So I have been rehabbing for a very long time. And I found dowsing was an excellent way to create the mind-body connection and to help restore my own health. So I've been drug-free since 2005. And even 3 years ago, I was told not to walk or be weight-bearing, but I continue to focus on the mind-body connection and the dosing and trying to figure things out. So last year, I actually set world records at the gym. So I'm kind of the poster child for, you know what, dosing. With dosing, you can restore your health. So I'm going to be, that's what I'm talking about right now. One of the things I have,
Susan, I'm just going to
yes,
interrupt there. I think you're sharing the wrong screen there. We're looking at your presenter screen.
is it the presenter screen?
Looks like it to me
Well,
because I can.
you can see where I'm going?
I'm seeing all your slide controls and everything. Yeah, on your next
Yeah,
slide.
well, let me stop the share and try it again. And folks know that presenting is always can always be a challenge. So screen 2, I want to do. How about this one? Now can you see me as a little kid?
Yeah, that's
Or
better.
no?
Okay,
Good.
we got that one. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We back each other up all the time, right? Anyway, I figured out the autoimmune disorders, and there are many of them, can be the self not recognizing the self. So for me right now, I'm focused on the microbiome, and that's all over our body. That we have part in our nose, which deals with mucus production and antimicrobial chemicals. The mouth, the lungs, the stomach, the colon, sexual organs, our skin. So the microbiome is enormous. On the left side there, you see, well, what affects our microbiome? How do we end up with who we are, what we are? And it can be genetics, what we come in with. It can be our environment. Our diet is a big part of it, our lifestyle, our hormones and industry, you know, where we live and all the chemicals that go around all the time. So our microbiome is all over our body, but I would like to talk mostly about the gut microbiome. And from the little picture, you can see all kinds of really disturbing things that are in our guts. And you know, and it's a bit horrifying, but we know that there are more non-human cells in our microbiome than there are human cells in our entire body. So that is a pretty odd thing to think of. But a healthy gut microbiome supports our immune system. It resists and kills pathogens. It can induce intestinal cells to produce antimicrobial peptides and antibodies. So this is all medical stuff, but it's very easy to research. But what's interesting, and I've only really come to realize recently, that the gut microbiota is responsible, medical professionals think, for 90% of diseases and can be traced to the health of your microbiome. And these are digestive health, metabolic health, cancers, mental health, and immune system health. So the gut, you know, back in the day when I was diagnosed with arthritis, I did come to believe eventually that it was simply inflammation. So I tend not to name diseases, but to refer to symptoms, inflammation, for example. So what a big number. What is this? 1 quadrillion microbes are in our bodies, more than human cells. It's other things that are alive. There's bacteria in there. There's viruses. There's protozoa, single-celled organisms, archaea, and eukaryotes. Probably not saying that correctly. But there's all kinds of living things inside of us that are not part of us. So how is that working, right? It's symbiotic. Without all these things inside of us, we'd not be able to survive as human beings. So we know about the gut-brain connection. You know, we have the mind-body connection, and we have the gut-brain connection. And the gut as we've seen in the previous slide, it impacts our brain function, our mood, our health, our cognition, basically most inflammatory diseases. So many of us, we've started diets or health programs, or I've got to eat nutritiously, whatever that is. So we have the thought, and the thought goes from the brain down to the gut. But there are more signals. We're talking about the vagus nerve now, as you probably know. 80% of the signals traveling on the vagus nerve between the gut and the brain, 80% of those are coming from your protozoa, your fungus, your bacteria, your viruses, and they're all saying, feed me. So while we have the greatest intention to live right, be right, and maintain our health, there's a whole different living organism that is not human and honestly doesn't care about us as humans, that is demanding things inside of us. So hopefully you guys would care to pick up your pendulums, but here's something you can dose. We don't dose the health of our gut microbiome, because that's the health of the bacteria and parasites and viruses. If we ask, sometimes people have a disease, they say, well, how's your cancer? Well, my cancer is doing fine. So what, the cancer is doing fine, or our human health is doing fine? So when you're dosing this, and I do invite you to dose this, because we all have symptoms, we all have something. If not us, we know somebody that does. Don't ask, or I invite you, do whatever seems right to you, but instead of asking for the health of your gut microbiome, ask how your gut microbiome supports your human health. And I always use a plus minus chart. So not just yes, no, but on a percentage basis, what percentage of your gut microbiome is supporting your human health? Conversely, you can ask what percentage of your gut microbiome is not supporting your human health. And I have a handout that I'm very happy to send to you, a worksheet on this. So sometimes we can simply dose once we know, and very few of us will have 100% my gut microbiome is healthy. But I invite you to dose if it's not perfect, if it's not supporting your health. I invite you to dose. Is it possible for me to use dosing to increase the structure of my microbiome to support my human health? So hopefully you get a yes on that. And then if you do get a yes, I can dose to increase my health, human health, always human health. And those of you who know I have a protocol, I've now added and updated my protocol to talk about our human body systems, not just the human body, because when you only increase the health of our human body, the gut microbiome isn't human. So it's part of our human system. So it's for me, a new way of thinking about things, about the gut, because I often hear people saying, oh, I did a parasite cleanse, or I've done a cleanse to clear out whatever, the fungus, the viruses in my gut. But some of those funguses and bacteria and protozoa, parasites, some of that is actually essential for our gut health. So be careful what you ask for, because you do get that. But there's other aspects that affect our gut microbiome, and I invite you to dose. To what extent do these things influence my gut health? And that can be antibiotics, which thank goodness for the professional medical teams that can prescribe us antibiotics to help certain conditions in our body. But sometimes the antibiotics kill off our little buddies inside of us too. Other factors can be chemical exposure, exercise. And those of you who know me know that I have gone from being basically a crippled woman to setting world records at the gym. And you've heard this before, but we have to lift heavy weights. We have to do cardio. We need social engagement. There's all kinds of things that we need for our health span, not just lifespan. And a lot of these things, the weight, the exercise, the breathing, that affects the health of the way our gut microbiome can support us. And just for the record, 10,000 steps is not enough. I mean, it's nice that we all track that, but it takes more than that. And there's plenty of research out there. One book I often recommend is Dr. Peter Attia, Attia, and it's called Outlive. And all the science is there if you want that. But, prebiotics, probiotics, sleep, stress, smoking, alcohol, all these things can influence our gut health and either support our human health or create inflammation. So as always, I suggest people use the dosing chart. To what extent, and you can think if you've had antibiotics in the last while, to what extent are the to what extent are the residual effects of the antibiotics creating a gut health system that does not support my ongoing health? And for the record, eating yogurt with probiotics isn't really enough either. So this is pretty serious chemistry and pretty serious medicine. There's tons of research on it. So I do have a handout on this, and I'm always happy to provide that. I have a dosing protocol, which some of you have, but I'll send that again. And the microbiome worksheet gives you a little more structure on how to dose your microbiome, and I invite you to do that. In addition, of course, I've written all the books, which are available on Amazon. And that's it for me. So I'm going to stop my share. If I can get back to the screen. And we're back to us.
Great. Thanks, Susan. That's really useful
Thank you.
information. Okay, so our final speaker tonight, we put him last so that he didn't have to get up too early because it's like 4 a.m. in Japan, but he was here anyway. So please welcome Nobuo Kato and Masako Watanabe, who's going to be his interpreter. Nobu, over to you.
Masako, could you please unmute? Thank you.
Okay. I'm Nobuo Kato, President of Japanese Society of Dowsing. I'm really happy to hear and, thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to speak in Japanese and interpreter Masako gonna change it into English. それでは、私は、日本におけるダウジングの状況と現在、そしてこれからの計画を話したいと思います。
So I would like to talk about the current condition or the situation in relation to dowsing in Japan, as well as the future plan of the dowsing in Japan.
日本では9世紀頃に、弘法大師という僧侶が、水脈を探して人を助けたという記述がありますが、あまりダウジングの文化はありませんでした。
Well, there is a record that the Buddhist monk called Kobo Daishi found water veins using his staff around 9th century. But in Japan, it seems that we didn't have the culture of dowsing.
私は25年ほどダウジングに関わっています。
Well, first of all, I've been involved with dowsing for the last 25 years.
約20年ほど前に日本で爆発的なパワーストーンブーム、天然石ブームが起こりました。
Well, about 20 years ago, there was a very explosive phenomena that power stone, the gemstone, became very popular in Japan.
たくさんの人が天然石のビーズを手首につけて、それをすると幸せになったり、彼女ができたり、お金が入るみたいな、ことが流行ったわけです。
So in those days, people started to wear gemstone beads, bracelets, tons of them, expecting that will bring them fortune or girlfriends or money.
ちょっとクレイジーですね。
So a bit crazy.
で、その天然石の、商売を一生懸命な人たちが日本に天然石で作ったペンジュラムを、持ち込みました。
And those dealers who export stone gems, the gemstones, and wants to make business, started to export gemstones to Japan.
とてもファンシーだったので、たくさんの人が 買いました。もう何千個という単位で売れました。
So, as well as the gemstone pendulum, so many people thought it was cool, so thousands of pendulum were sold.
しかし、2つの問題がありました。
However, there were two problems.
一つは、知識がないので、イエス・ノークエスチョンをするだけがダウジングだと思ったということです。
The first problem is that because they didn't have any knowledge about dowsing, they thought the only thing they could do is to ask yes or no questions.
二つ目は、特別なサイキック能力者だけがダウジングができると人が考えたことです。
A second problem is that the people got the idea that the dowsing can be done only by special psychic people with a special ability.
そして私はグラムとスーザンに会って日本でのダウジングの物語が始まります。
And in those days, I met Susan and Grahame, and a new story about dowsing started in Japan.
彼らは日本に来てダウジングを啓蒙してくれました。
They came to Japan to spread the words of dowsing, the knowledge about, the proper knowledge about dowsing.
そしてここにいるジョイもその知識を私たちに与えてくれました。
And Joy also came to help us understand about dowsing in Japan.
まずはダウジングはメンタルダウジングというものがあります。
First of all, there is so-called mental dowsing.
スーザンがダウジングプロトコルを教えてくれたことはとても有意義です。
And Susan taught us protocol for dowsing that has been very useful.
プロトコルはとても重要ですが、ユニークなのは日本には霊気ヒーリングというものがありました。
So the protocol very unique and important. However, in Japan, we had a Reiki sort of guideline.
霊気は正しく海外に普及しているとは思っていませんが、重要なポイントは霊気もプロトコルを持っているということです。
So I think the Reiki is being spread out to the world, perhaps not so in a correct way, but in Japan we have a so-called protocol for Reiki practitioners.
創始者の臼井美香夫はスーザンと同じように毎日そのプロトコルを実施するように弟子に指導していたんです。
And the founder of Reiki, Misao Usui, was guiding all the practitioners to practice this protocol every morning.
実は日本人の霊気プラクティショナーですらそのことを今忘れてしまっています。
Even the Japanese Reiki practitioners have forgotten that now.
そのプロトコルは、これです。今日だけは怒るな。
So this protocol says, well, you need to chant this every morning, but it says, only today you should not get angry.
心配するな。
Do not worry.
感謝して行を励め。
Be grateful and practice diligently.
人に親切に。
And be kind to others.
そしてこれは、日本では承服の秘法万病の霊薬と言いました。つまり、幸福と、健康のための方法だと言っています。
And this is regarded as an approach for health and happiness and well-being.
つまり、スーザン・コリンズと同じことを日本の偉大な臼井先生は言っていたわけです。
That is to say, this founder, Misao Usui of Reiki, was saying the same thing as Susan.
そして日本ではあまりエルロットを使う人はいないし、ボバーなどは存在は知りませんでした。
Well, well, in Japan, people didn't know about L-Rod. Uh, Needless to say, people didn't know anything about boba.
そして私はラジエスセシアという考え方に興味を覚え、フランスやアメリカやイギリスでそれを学びました。
And then I got interested in so-called radiesthesia, and I learned that art in France, England, and in America.
ダウジングをプロトコルで安定させるように、自然科学の法則を使ってダウジングをし、その、精度や効果を上げようとするものだと思っています。
And of course, protocol can stabilize dowsing practice, but I think the natural science can also contribute to dowsing in terms of efficiency.
色、形、角度、比率、動きなどを使って、ダウジングを整えていくわけです。
That is to say, to help dowsing by use of colors, shape, angles, proportions, movements, sounds, etc.
特に形、エジプト由来の神聖図形を使うことが多く、こんな形になっていくわけです。
So, especially, we resort to the sacred geometry originated in ancient Egypt. And so the pendulum becomes in this kind of shape.
そういったことを広めつつ、日本でほとんどゼロと言っていいほど知識がないのがラジオニクスについてです。
So this kind of thing I want to promulgate in Japan, but there is hardly any knowledge about so-called radionics in Japan.
そのことを、グラムとスーザンに、相談をし、そして、いろいろなガイドを受けました。
And so I asked for guidance from Grahame and Susan, and I received quite a lot of advices.
これは、まだ小さい方ですよね。ラジオニクスの機械としてはシンプルです。
This is a simple and small version of a radionics machine.
日本のみんなは、クレイジーな機械であると思っていました。
Well, many people thought this was a really crazy machine in Japan.
ただ、ちょっとユニークなのは、こんなものが使用部品として使われているわけです。
However, what's unique is there is a component like this being used for this machine.
ニコラス・テスラのバイフィラーコイルをラジオニクスに応用したものです。
This is applying the bifilar of Nikola Tesla.
テスラ。で、私はそれを、この形はまず、ラビリンスにめちゃくちゃ似てますよね。
Well, first of all, this shape is very closely resembling the labyrinth.
ラビリンスのワークショップも、グラム、そして別の方と2回もやってるんですよ。アレックス。
Well, yes, in Japan, we had two major workshops of labyrinth with the Grahame and other specialists.
で、私はそれを取り出して小さいものを作ることにしました。これは出来たてです。
I extracted this component and then made a small compact device like this. I created this.
で、これを使ってダウジングをすれば、ラジオニクスと、ダウジングを融合した素晴らしいこともできることも分かっています。
And I know that combining this little device and the art of dowsing, we can come up with a very effective effectiveness like of radionics.
で、また今、新しいラジオニクスの強い動きがあることにも気がついています。
And I'm also aware that there is a strong movement about radionics nowadays.
ラジオニクスというと、レイトという数字の連続を使うことだと思われがちですが、リエージェントという概念が生まれてます。
Well, when you think about radionics, you think that they resort to this series of numbers called rate. However, nowadays we have the introduction of reagent.
色や天然石やフラワーエッセンスのコードや、いろいろなものをエネルギーパターンとして、利用しています。新生図形もそうです。
Well, the reagent is kind of an energy pattern resorted from color, natural stones, flower essence, for instance, and as well as sacred geometry.
つまり、今思うことは、ダウジングも、ラジエステシアも、ラジオニクスも、レイキも、全部重なっているという私の考えです。
In other words, I think my belief is that dowsing, radionics, radiesthesia, and Reiki, they are all overlapping with each other.
なので、さらに皆さんのお力も借りながら、日本に、ダウジングを使って健康と幸せを作るノウハウを広めていきたいと思っています。
So, with your help, I would like to develop this dowsing method which will help people's happiness and well-being.
なので、これを機会に、インターナショナルな仲間たちと共に、素敵なダウジングを広めていきたいと考えています。よろしくお願いします。
Taking this opportunity to get to know each other and work together to develop this wonderful art of dowsing in the world together.
はい、以上が私のスピーチになります。ありがとうございます。
Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Nobu. And thank you, Masako-san. Yes, we must talk more about this, Nobu.
Yeah, yes. We have a plan of your great.
Yeah, we shall talk more. Okay, everybody. Well, we've run over time as usual, but no worries. I hope you've enjoyed our mix of speakers tonight for International Dowsing Day. I should mention, since we're talking about labyrinths, that Saturday, the 2nd of May, was, of course, World Labyrinth Day. So we are very blessed with having Alex talking about labyrinths today. And there's been a few mentions of the labyrinth throughout. So thank you, everybody, for joining us once again. And thank you to Susan for facilitating this. And we'll see you next year, hopefully. So bye for now.
Thank you very much. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
We'll see you again.